welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, with me, Emma Turner, and my co-host, Tom Sherrington. Good evening, Tom.
Hello, Emma. Yeah, great to see you. And here we are, sort of sweltering away in hot North London. Yeah, it's great. We shouldn't complain. It's lovely.
It's absolutely beautiful. And talking of things that are absolutely beautiful, the opportunity to talk to our guest tonight is absolutely fabulous. It is the one, the only Patrick Cozier. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Delighted to have you on. Got so many questions we wanted to kind of ask about your work and your latest piece of writing. But for those people who haven't worked with you before, had the pleasure of that, or know about what you do, a little overview of who you are, where you are, what your journey through education's been.
Yeah, no worries at all. I am a secondary head teacher at Highgate Wood School in North London. Enjoy my job very much. And I've been the head teacher there now. This is my 19th year as a head. So it's been a very, very long stint. I can genuinely say that I enjoy the job, I think, even more now than when I started. And I think that's important because a lot of the stuff that I do now kind of links to that, this idea of being a leader for a long time, that, you know, people think it's a burnout job, and I understand that it can be, but my view very much is that it doesn't have to be. And so because of that, I do a lot of stuff around trying to promote leadership as being something that people should aspire towards, because it's a really good thing to get involved in. So in addition to being a head teacher, I do various other bits and pieces. I'm a trustee of a couple of charities. My favourite one being Show Races and the Red Card. I'm co-vice chair of the trustee group there. Does some amazing stuff. I do various talks on leadership and write a little bit as well. So I'm very much into trying to spread the gospel as much as I can. All of my teaching career has been in London. A London boy, born and bred. So I was born in North London, in Islington, and have lived most of my life in North London as well. Did a little stint south of the river as well at the start of my career, but now settled in North London and enjoying it.
I feel like I should give you some kind of a long service award, some kind of long. Just rewind that bit. How many years in head teacher now?
Yeah, 19 years. Absolutely.
That's absolutely wonderful. And it's, like you say, it's so great to talk to somebody with that professional wisdom and experience and that view of the role, and it's evolving, it's kind of evolution over time. It's wonderful to kind of have that opportunity to do that. And I know that you dig into that quite a lot in your book. Have you had a chance, Tom, to read Patrick's book?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's excellent. So, I mean, I was privileged enough to be sent like an advanced copy and to read through it. And so, I mean, we're gonna talk all about that calm leadership. And I noticed that on Twitter that, you know, this is, and on LinkedIn that I've noticed you becoming more and more sort of I guess out there putting these ideas around. I actually know, and I'm going to just say this straight away, that when I've known you, Patrick, for a long time, and I was aware of you before. I used to be the deputy head of Alexandra Park School in Haringey when you were, I think, a deputy or an assistant head, certainly in at Highgate Wood. And it's like parallel thing. And some of the things you wrote about really resonated with me, like without. I remember going to a head teachers meeting in Haringey on behalf of my head at the time, and having a similar experience to you, which was the sort of feeling that, blimey, if these guys can do it, then maybe I can do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like that community. But the thing is that you've now done the thing which I just think is quite inspiring, to be honest, which is to have been the head ever since. And then the other thing, which is a very important connection, is as well as I working in Haringey, most of my friends who live around here, their children went to Highgate Wood, and you are their child's head teacher. So you know what that means. That means like Mr. Cozier is the name that you hear. Like that's the name. You know, head teachers get talked about like way beyond your control. So you're kind of like a bit of a local celebrity amongst the people. People know who you are. So
Part of the
how's that been? I mean,
furniture.
how do you feel like being like the sort of community figure that's so like high profile in Crouch End and this part of Haringey?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel you have to embrace it. And one of the things that is important for me is accepting that that's part of the responsibility. You know, if you're a head teacher, then you're a leader of a community, and therefore it comes with the territory. I think at the beginning, I remember feeling the weight of that. And I think over the years, I've been able to kind of change my mindset to see it as something which genuinely is a privilege to have the opportunity to be influential within that space rather than feeling that it's a burden. So for me, it's very much something that I feel very proud of and I embrace. I'll give you a really specific example of that as well. So being a black head teacher in this space is a particular thing that I think for me helped me get used to that sense of responsibility really early, because I remember one of the things that happened when I first got the job is that I had this sense from all of the parents of the black children that attended Highgate Wood School that I was in there fighting for them. It was really interesting on parents' evenings, and there was always this sense of like, oh, you're never really rooting for you. And I know that I've spoken to colleagues over the years who found that sort of uh, expectation a pressure, but I've always felt that it was a privilege and it was something to be really proud of and to really own. And I think that has spread across my career in terms of the things that you talked about in terms of being in the community and being that figurehead. I think it's really important.
Because you mentioned the phrase in the book when you call it that cloak of representation.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that phrase before. And could you just explain the kind of the thing, because I will do it very clumsily, the kind of the narrative around that's in the book that kind of ends with that description of feeling that cloak of representation in your life and your work.
Yeah, because I think for me, it was very much about recognizing that when you're the head, you are in a role. And so you are not the role and the role is not you. You are playing a role. Now, to be fair, at times I think the boundaries between you and the role become really blurred. And I think sometimes that's inevitable, although I think there are risks involved in that. But for me, it was very much about saying that there is a difference between Patrick Cozier, the person, and Mr. Cozier, the head teacher. And this idea of putting on the cloak was about becoming Mr. Cozier rather than Patrick. I would even say that sometimes in situations where if I was dealing with a difficult decision I had to make, and I might say to a member of staff, look, I'm going to be honest with you, Patrick would say something very different from what Mr. Cozier has to say, because the level of responsibility requires me to be in role. And I don't think when you're ahead, when you're in those public spaces, you ever feel you can really take that off in those spaces because you are that role in that context.
And I found that bit really interesting where you were talking about how that leads you to potentially sometimes editing yourself. And
Yes.
I love that bit about the car and the drive
Yeah.
into school.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what? It's fascinating because I remember, I mean, I did it like for years and years, over and over again. And then one day I suddenly thought, why are you doing that? The idea that because so I, yeah, I'm a guy that I love listening to my music, and the music I listen to is the kind of music that you can often hear from beyond the car because it's reggae music with this deep, heavy bass line and all the rest of it. So as the car is pulling up into lovely kind of middle class Crouch End as it is, and my car is booming from this heavy bass line. I was always very conscious as I arrived that I didn't want to impose me on the area. It was really interesting how it worked. So I'd turn the music down. And what I realized in the end was that it was something that was very much about me editing myself as I moved into this environment where I didn't feel that that aspect of myself was relevant for that for that area, for that role, for that space. Because I don't do it when I arrive home. When I arrive home, the music goes down when I turn the engine off. But when I was arriving at work, and I try not to do it now, but as I was arriving at work, there was always a sense of I turned into the road and down it went. But yes, you're right. That whole notion about editing yourself is a really important one, because I do think that when you are the head, you recognize that the level of scrutiny that you are under for every single thing that you do or say is huge. It's massive.
Mm. And you'll recognise this as well, won't you, Tom? Because you don't realise until you're in the big chair, do you? Don't realise that level of scrutiny, or that kind of microscope that suddenly switches round to be on you.
And I suppose there's different things that that applies, doesn't it? So I mean, and I'm interested in this, and I feel like, I've made mistakes of every kind. let's not talk about me. But like one of them, I think, was being a bit too open about things like politics, and I've cringed about that a bit. I mean, I think I was quite open about being a Labour supporter, and all my students would have known that. And I think perhaps that wasn't appropriate. But I was trying to model political engagement, perhaps. But I was happy for them to know our music, and in your case, everyone knows you're a ludicrous gooner.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
like all gooners are very deep Arsenal fan, and it's a bit you wear it on your sleeve, don't you? And that's okay, isn't it? Because that's part of your personality. So do you feel like there were things which you kind of amplify because they're more acceptable, or you felt they were, and but things to do with like musical taste and so on, you felt had to edit because it didn't quite match the culture and environment?
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because I don't think that I did it consciously. I
Yeah.
think it's something that I recognized that I was doing on reflection. And actually, I mean, what was interesting from my perspective was the fact that, because I do like to share with my students, I do like to be a human person, and I think it leads so much into them being able to talk to you on a level, and for you, to connect with you and to identify with you and all those sorts of things. So like you said, football is a great one to do that. But I think that, yeah, there are some aspects of your character that you don't always feel are appropriate. And I think one of the things that, again, coming back to this idea about being a black head teacher in a school in Hornsey, Crouch End, was very much around how much of this can I actually uh, afford to share and show outwardly. So the music was a really good indication of that. Um, and it's interesting, actually, because politically, I've never been that shy, actually, about sharing that. I've always said that, my late father would turn in his grave if I voted for anything other than Labour. And I don't mind people knowing that, because actually I feel like I can say that, but without ever feeling that I'm in a position to criticize other people for having different views from me. So I don't mind sharing who I am, as long as people understand that me sharing who I am doesn't mean that I am in any way intolerant or judgmental about anyone who doesn't agree with what I think, because I'm just a person like anybody else.
Mm.
I'm really interested. In fact, so just I think we should just uh, spell out the obvious for people who were kind of hinting at it. I mean, you're about to publish a book called Calm Leadership, and that's also the kind of like the name that you have as a kind of association on your Twitter and so on.
Right,
And so we're going to get into the whole thing of what that means. But I
right.
was, so we've been reading it, and Emma and I were talking before we came on that we both like really enjoy it and think it's, people will really find it interesting. It's a different type of book. It's very personal, kind of like bitterly, deeply personal. It's almost like it's so honest. It's like I think it's a gift to be able to be that honest in writing, and I think people will really respond to that because you don't often get that level of candor. But right early on, so it's like page 4 in the way it's formatted. I'm reading it. You're talking straight away about being a black leader, and
Yeah.
that's such an important thing. It's like front loading that whole discussion. And when you first, blew my mind. When you first became a head teacher in 2006, you were one of 11 black men who were secondary heads in the whole country. That is just unbelievable. and I don't know whether you can tell us whether you think it's improved or not, but and in terms of percentages, um, like it's way under the percentage in the population. So you're kind of like blazing a trail, and as well as the community responsibility that kind of responsibility there. Do you feel a weight of responsibility as for representing, or do you sometimes not feel that you want to carry that responsibility? How do you feel about that?
No, I embrace it. For me, it's not, it is a responsibility, it is, but I don't feel that it's a weight. I genuinely see it as a privilege and an opportunity. I'm proud to have the opportunity to do it. And so I think for me, it is really important. You mentioned about the 11 head teachers. I knew half of them. And that for me was really kind of like, it feels wrong, because there were so few of us. It has got better. It has got better. It is nowhere near where it should be, which is why a lot of the work that I do is around trying to encourage people from minoritized backgrounds to become leaders because we need more. But it has become better in terms of numbers. What I would say, though, is that the there is a particular challenge that you face in terms of being able to not just be in the role, but to do the role in a way that makes your diversity mean something. Because one of the things that I say to a lot of the um, Black and Asian aspiring leaders that I speak to now is that the idea of diversity is to make a difference. And if you aspire to be in that role and you get there and you behave the same as everybody else, then there was no point. You haven't made a difference other than, visually it makes a difference. And obviously with the, people younger in their careers and with the students, you're visibly representation of who they might aspire to be. So that bit's great. But actually, if you're not doing anything in that space which is authentic, which speaks to who you are and your culture and all of those things, then it's a missed opportunity. And so for me, yeah, I absolutely feel that it's a responsibility, but it's a responsibility that I embrace because I think it's important to try to do it well.
I'm hearing the image I've got in my head, Patrick, is it's a bit like a torch to carry.
Yeah,
It's a bit like this is a privilege, and I need to shine a light on this.
yeah.
And you don't feel the weight when you're carrying that torch when it's
No, no. And I never have done. And I never have done. It's never felt like a horrible weight. What I would say though is that in the beginning, I would not have been as bold as I am now about talking publicly about it and about really championing it. That kind of courage has evolved over time. And I think that's something that for me makes it really important because actually I know how difficult it is to do it because these things can rebound and backlash on you in ways that are really quite challenging. So I'm bolder about it now than I was at the beginning of my career for sure.
and that resonates with that calm approach, doesn't it? This kind of it absolutely the wisdom in that book just jumps off every jumps off every page in terms of the learnings that have gone on with you as a leader through
Mm.
your career. So I kind of wanted to give you to give listeners the opportunity to unpack what that calm acronym is, because when I first read the title, I
Yeah.
thought it was going to be let's light some joss sticks, do a few yoga poses, and just do some deep breathing. It's absolutely not
No,
that, is it?
no, no, absolutely no, definitely not that. I mean, essentially, what it is, it's about it's about the journey that I've been through, that I've experienced and lived as a leader, that has helped me through going through some really difficult experiences, reach a state where I feel I can do the role and be calm and focused and measured and balanced and have a sense of perspective on all of those things.
Mm.
Because at the start of my career as a leader, I was none of those things. I was scared of everything. I was scared of my own shadow. Every single challenge that I faced felt like the edge of a precipice. It was really quite challenging. And so the calm thing is kind of almost a mapping of the journey. So the C part is what I refer to as the confront stage, which is where you are confronting what it feels like to be a leader. So I think you mentioned earlier on that you don't know how it feels until you're in it. And I think that's true. You can be technically prepared to be a leader, but you will never be prepared for what it feels like until you're in it because you don't know. And so the C phrase is confront. And I talk specifically around things to do with, for me, my journey, imposter syndrome and paranoia. I mentioned earlier on about this idea that, that you're suddenly the center of attention and everything that you do or say really matters. But also that imposter thing, because, suddenly you're the head teacher and it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. How can I be leading a community, and I've no idea what I'm doing? It's nuts. So that's kind of the first phase, the C phase. The A phase I refer to as the adaptation phase, and that is the things that you have to do to begin to get your head around the fact that you are a leader and this is what it involves. And so there are two aspects to that for me. One is about developing a sense of perspective, which I think is really important because everything feels big and huge, and actually the reality is that it isn't. There are very few things that are huge. They exist, but they're few and far between. Most things actually are manageable and doable and resolvable, and you have to get to a point where you can recognize that. The other part of it is embracing the fact that leadership is difficult. And I think for me, that's so important because I think at the start, I spent a lot of time lamenting the fact that the job was so hard. And you get that thing that arrives on your desk, or person comes to your office and presents a problem, or the email that drops, and you think, oh my God, why do I have to deal with this? Why have I got to be the person to solve this problem? Why can't I just have a day that goes by where something like this doesn't happen? And actually, I completely shifted that when I accepted the fact, no, it's difficult. Leadership is difficult. It just is because it's supposed to be. And I always give the example of becoming a firefighter. And I think, you couldn't become a firefighter and then say, I'm not going anywhere near any burning building. Well, that's the job. That's the job. And so you accept it for what it is. And I think that anyone who thinks that leadership should be easy, I think has got it wrong. Leading is complex and difficult, and therefore you signed up to do that and you have to accept that. So that's kind of the C and the A bit. And that's all about what I call achieving internal calm. That's about controlling your thinking and your emotions so that you can get through those things. And then the other parts are what we do externally. So the L and the M are really about what you do to convey that calm to your people, to your students, to your staff, to your parents, to your community, or whatever organization it is you're leading. And so the L part is leading people. And that's more subjective because for me, that's about leading people according to my values and what I believe in. So I talk about honesty, integrity, humility, optimism, all of the things that I think are really important, leading with humanity and those sorts of things. And that's because those were core and central to my values and the way that I wanted to lead. Now, for other people, that might mean different things, and that's fine. But I talk about, how those things are important to me and how I think they enhance your ability to be a calm leader, because essentially you're doing things that's always trying to convey a calm amongst everybody and build confidence. And then the last phase, the M bit, is about the maturity. And that for me is when you have discovered the kind of leader that you ultimately want to be, and it fits your skin. You are that person and you're comfortable being that person. You're not trying to be anybody else anymore. you're mature as a leader, you know what you stand for, and you're bold about being that person.
I love that first bit because all I could think when I was reading it is just lean into the chaos, just
Yeah,
embrace it, accept it.
yeah,
When I was in headship, we used to have crazy Tuesdays. Everything, I don't know what it was about a Tuesday, but I could never get through a Tuesday without something completely insane happening. I
yeah,
tried to mitigate it for it every week, and I was like, actually, no, this just seems to happen every week.
yeah.
It is what
Don't
it is.
fight it. Don't fight it. Get your head and your mindset straight on. So, right, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
What do I
But
need?
just so I mean, so, to me, I mean, there's the whole just quickly. When does the book come out exactly? Or is it
I don't have a date yet, so we are currently in the copy editing phase.
okay?
So
So
I now have a book cover.
yeah,
Uh, the copy editor is currently reading, and I'm sure will send me lots of different comments for me to be able to respond to. So I think realistically, we're looking at sometime in the autumn.
okay. I mean, that's fantastic, and we can make a fuss of it when it comes out. But I feel like it's actually quite. I feel quite extra privileged now that we actually have to read it up front. But I'm a sucker for a framework. I was saying this to our last guest, who was Bruce Robertson, who's also another head teacher. He has his stuff about teaching and learning, but this idea of the acronym actually meaning something, that sings to me. So calm is an acronym, but also a structure, and this whole thing of it like it's a journey, isn't it? The confronting, adapting, and then and you have this sort of date table where it talks about achieving internal calm, and then
It's,
conveying external calm, sort of another little framing. So it's interesting because how it applies to lots of different scenarios. And I'm just thinking back to my time as the head teacher, thinking, I think that's one of the things that sometimes I felt anyway, that you weren't really allowed to admit that it was. There are times I felt like I was totally drowning. Just
yeah,
that feeling of like, why is it so hard? Why does no one, why does no one seem to have any answers? I'm asking everyone, help. And no one seems to be able to have any answers. And it feels to all come down to me, like everyone's looking to me for the answers. I don't know the answers.
yeah,
And I feel like, I mean, you must have dealt with that. I mean, in fact, I remember once we met to discuss a student, a kind of like one of those, transfers of a student who's having
yeah,
trouble at your school, want to avoid a permanent exclusion. He came to my school,
yeah,
that type of thing. And it's like these individual kids, they're challenging. It's tough. You've got a community around you with all these expectations, and you've got to try to manage millions of things. But that feeling. So who have you found? I mean, have you processed this all yourself? Have you found that you've had people around you to like support with all of this? And that's for me one of the things I'm really interested in with headship is who
yeah.
helps the heads, who helps you through all of this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been different people for different purposes. And I think that's been a really important thing. So I've always been willing to draw upon expertise from wherever I can find it. So whether it's a fellow head teacher or whether it's a very knowledgeable governor about a particular thing. So I will take advice from anywhere. One of the things that I mentioned as part of the leading phase of calm leadership is the humility bit, which I think is incredibly important. Um, you can be confident about the things that you're good at, but you have to always know that you're still learning and you do not know everything. And so one of the things that I think is really important for me is that you take that pressure off yourself of having to know the answers. I don't mind standing in front of my staff and saying, actually, this is the path that we've chosen, but I don't know whether this is going to work or not. I don't know. How can I know? I genuinely believe that life and leadership and everything that we know around us is far too complex for any of us to ever really know what's going to happen. And so I think once you accept that, then you take the pressure off because my thing is, look, the worst that can happen is it goes wrong. But then what do? You try and figure out why it went wrong. You take stock and then you either change, amend, or throw out, and then you go again. And I think for me, that's a really important part of that whole thing about having to be the person that has all the answers. I don't think you do. At the beginning, I felt I had to, and that's why the pressure you feel as a head is huge. And what I then started to realize is actually I don't. My role is to make the decisions. but how I come about the information that I need in front of me to feel confident that I'm making a good decision, well, there's no rules around that. Do whatever you need to do, speak to whoever you want, get whatever advice you want, and ultimately you then have to pull it together and decide. But I don't need to be the expert, and I think that's important.
So if you could sit down with yourself at the beginning of your career, if you could kind of time travel and sit with yourself,
Mm.
is this book the conversation that you'd want to have with yourself?
100%, 100%. And that was one of the things that drove me to write it, actually, was this idea of trying to provide something that I wish I'd had in the early days. I
Mm.
wish that someone would have told me that horrible, gut-wrenching feeling that I had of always, and I mean always, being on the edge of my comfort zone was normal.
Mm.
I think that mentally I struggled with it because I didn't understand that it was a normal part of the process of adapting to this leadership role. I thought I couldn't do it, and I sat in meetings with other heads at times and saw people almost parading like peacocks, and everything's fine and great and all that kind of stuff. And I wish that someone had been able to say to me, actually, Patrick, the fear that you feel, that imposter syndrome that you're feeling, that absolute dread of the next email that's going to arrive from that difficult parent, or that call from Ofsted, that those things, feeling scared of it, it's okay. It's
Mm.
normal. And the other thing that I would have said to myself is it it doesn't, well, this is the thing that I believe, it doesn't get easier. I don't think it does. I think the leadership doesn't ever get easy, but it feels easier because you become better. And I
Mm.
think that's the thing that if there's anything at all that I felt that I've learned over this journey, is that you have to think of yourself as learning all the time. When you start, you are far from the finished article. In fact, you probably never are, but you are learning constantly. And as you learn, the learning process can be painful, but ultimately it's making you better and stronger and wiser and all those things.
Sometimes it's just recognizing that not everything matters as well. When you first start out in something in leadership, you're like, I've got to get everything right. Everything matters.
Yeah,
Everything matters.
yeah,
And by the end of it, you're like, yeah, that can wait till next week, or I'll do that whenever,
yeah,
you know. Yeah.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
And
And that's what I talk about in the terms of the developing that sense of perspective is being able to recognize the things that are really important from the ones that just appear to be, but actually are not necessarily that big a deal.
that bit resonates with me because I once in headship lost my diary. It was when you only had a paper diary, and I lost it. I turned the house upside down, the school upside down, the cars. I could not find it anywhere. 3 months later, it turned up. But in those 3 months, nothing bad happened.
Yeah, that's it.
And
That's it.
occasionally I missed a meeting, but somebody would phone me up and go, are you coming? It's all right. All the big stuff that really mattered, the world kept turning, and that was a huge
Yes,
learning point for me. A lot of it didn't really matter. I
exactly.
I was making it matter rather than actually
A
having a
100%.
I think it's interesting because you say in the beginning of the book, like, if you're looking for a sort of book of theories of leadership, this isn't it. But I actually think that what emerges from the book is a kind of some aspects of that, where there's the framing of these sort of emotional aspects. Because actually, I would say, and looking back at my time as the head, I would say where it was the failure to deal with the emotional side that was my biggest problem. And I actually feel like I was too focused on like technical solutions and not focused enough on the other stuff. And it didn't give me the skills when I was suddenly in a deep end type school situation, which I wasn't as equipped for as I thought I was going to be. So I was going to do like a compressed version of your of your cycle, but I don't think I gave myself time, and certainly other people didn't give me enough time.
Yeah.
There's a You say that, Emma, like, did you feel like you're writing yourself? Well, for people who are going to read the book, there's a bit at the end. I thought I'd read bits of it out, but I actually think I would start to well up too much. I actually think I'd be too emotional to read it because it's quite a powerful thing at the end. So I'm going to leave it as a treat for people when you get the book. Patrick writes this letter to his young self,
Yeah.
and the first half, every line ends with, you think this is going to be bad, but that's okay. You think this is how you feel, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to look like other people have got this thing sorted while you feel you are struggling. That that's all in your head, and that's okay. And then it switches into, however, every line ends with "you will succeed," and it ends up with saying, people will learn from you, and you will help them succeed. And I just think it's very strong. It's like a very emotional thing. It makes you emotional
Yeah.
just looking at it. And
Yeah.
I wonder if it made you that emotional when you were writing it. Like this is the message.
Yeah.
Did you feel like quite
Yeah.
tears writing that?
Yeah, it was quite a cathartic process of
Mm,
writing this stuff. Because, and I'll tell you why, because this stuff is emotional.
mm,
Leadership is emotional. It's when you think about the range of situations that you have to deal with. I mean, when people that what's that saying that um I forgot how to put it now, but basically that life is far more varied than fiction. There's a saying there that I'm
Stranger
completely
than fiction.
yeah, yeah. I know I'm messing it up completely, but I believe that's true, and I think that in leadership you go through things that are always far more challenging than any in-tray task could ever suggest. Um, and and that stuff is emotional. You're dealing with other people's emotions, you're dealing with your own, because obviously as the leader you have that responsibility and all those sorts of things. And so for me, what I've been through to get to a point where I'm able to deal effectively with my emotions is through being emotional. So actually, I think the whole thing is steeped in that, and it's because I feel that. I feel that in my role in terms of my choice to be a head teacher. Um, I mentioned at some point in the book, when I was having a really difficult time, and I went to see my dad, and my dad being a man of real of real sympathy, not his response to me was, "Son, you chose the job." And I thought, God, but he's right, actually. I chose to do it. So
yeah,
do it and put everything into it.
Mm.
yeah. I mean, that's easier said than done, of course. But you
Yeah.
found a process to sort of process to do that, and it's so I'm interested in like whether you've taken this idea of the calm. Have you used that explicitly as a leadership framework within your school or with the students, or is it a kind of just like a personal tool for yourself?
I tell you what it is. I don't use it in my school, although I'm certainly thinking of doing that because I feel that there are ways in which I can apply it within my school to help develop some of the leadership that we have within the school. I think that there's a lot there about helping people to manage their emotions and lead in ways that are true to them and to be able to lead for a long time and not burn out. But for me, one of the reasons why calm leadership emerged at all was I remember being in conversation with newer head teachers, people who were kind of 2 or 3 years into their headship, and having these conversations about how challenging the role was. And one of the questions that I was asked a number of times was, how on earth do you do it? You've been a head teacher for all these years and you're still doing it and you're still enjoying it and you've still got energy and enthusiasm. How is it that you're able to do that? And what I realized was I didn't have a clue, actually. I didn't know. I didn't know the answer. And so this whole journey that's become calm leadership that has now resulted in this book is essentially me reflecting and trying to work out why I'm able to do what I do now, 19 years in, and still feel like actually I don't feel like stopping. I've got the energy and time to keep going for as long as I feel that way. And that's what it is. It's me, it's my reflection of trying to understand what has happened over my career that's enabled me to be able to do this job and continue doing it in the way that I do.
And I think the fact that that in itself champions the role of head teacher,
Yeah,
and there's a lot of people who see headship as a stepping stone to something else rather than a really important place to be, and to develop that richness and wisdom and genuine understanding of the reach of the role and the impact that you can have in a community.
Yeah.
And I think this book really champions that absolutely pivotal role in a
Yeah.
community, in a school, and it doesn't paint headship as something a badge to get on the road to somewhere else. This really champions the role in itself, which is so refreshing, and a message that needs to be out there more, that this is an important role, probably one of the most important roles that you can do in our system, because you are influencing so many families, so many children, day to day, day in, day out, with all the complex and knotty problems that come with that. And it's not somewhere reading a research paper in a room somewhere. This is front and center and dealing with communities and children. And I think that celebration of the complexity of it and the importance of it and the role being champion in itself is what just jumped off the page and kind of
Yeah.
smacked me around the face. I was like, God, I love this.
No, I think that's right, and for me, it's um it's kind of a recognition of the fact that it is so important and it is so pivotal and it is so influential in so many ways to so many people, because it's not just the kids but it's also the staff and so on. And so the strap line, calm leadership, developing leaders that last, that's important, because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is this idea that it's not about doing leadership for a short amount of time and then bouncing onto other things. This is about people who want to become leaders and really make a difference and a lasting impact over a period of time, and trying to, first of all, sell it and convince people that you can do it, and here's some ways in which you might be able to achieve it. And I think that's really important.
Where do you see? I mean, there are some other head teachers. I mean, every head teacher, has nothing but respect from me for the work they do. I just think it's a tough job, and especially when they've got longevity. And I always think people who stick it out is amazing to do that for so long. And but there's a school of thought which there's a kind of this type of emotional, personal stuff is kind of hard to like teach, because it's all very personal. But then
Yeah,
there's other stuff like which is more technical, like how do you balance a budget? How do you set a curriculum? How do you develop teaching and learning with
yeah,
CPD? And how do you use assessment and all these things? There's a whole range of technical knowledge that you need to have. So where does that sit for you? Because in a way that you sort of you sort of allude to the fact that there's all this stuff to learn, but the actual
yeah.
specifics of it, where do you feel that sits in your framing of the job, the technical knowledge that you need?
I think that's true in any area in which you become a leader. You have to understand the role, and you have to understand the nature. I was going to say that have to understand the nature of the business, whatever, our business is education, whatever, but you have to know stuff and you have to understand how it works. So I think all of those technical aspects of the role, I think, are incredibly important. You've got to know your craft. Um, but my belief is that there are very few things about the technical aspects of any role that cannot be taught and learned. You can study those things and you can learn how to do them. What I think really threw me at the start of my leadership career was I had no idea how it was going to feel. And that was the thing that really impacted on me. And
Mm.
so I wanted this book to really focus on how it feels and how you deal with how it feels. And so that's why I made a big thing of saying at the start of the book that this isn't the book that's going to talk to you about organizational diagrams and how to run effective meetings and yeah, and as you say, budgeting and all of that different stuff that comes into it. That, for me, that's all a given. Of course, you have to learn that stuff, because if you don't know those things, you can't do the job. But my thing was saying that actually you can learn all that stuff and still not lead effectively because you cannot deal with how it feels when you're in the role. And I remember being a deputy and being an assistant head, working very closely with my heads at the time and not really having a real sense of what they were going through. And then when I became a head, I thought, oh my God, this is what it's like. I realize that now. And so I think for me, the book is so much about that. It's what it feels like. And that's what I try to convey as much as I can.
Well, you
Do you
do it brilliantly. I mean, it's very powerful.
I was just thinking, Patrick, it'd be a really interesting read for chairs of governors or chairs of trustees to read this book. If they're involved in supporting, guiding, leading, performance managing,
Yeah.
whatever it is, the head teachers in their school, this is a real glimpse into the lived experience of the head teacher, which, like you say, we can go and tick off the technical aspects of is there a balanced budget and is there this, but actually, when we're talking with our leaders in school, have you had a vision and a glimpse into what their lived experience of the role is like? So
Yeah.
I think chairs and trustees and anybody involved with performance managing head teachers needs to read this.
Yeah, and of course, as we know, governing bodies, trust boards, have a responsibility to look after,
Mhm.
the head teacher's well-being. And I wonder how many people really understand how different behaviors can negatively impact. I mean, as in the book, I talk about a whole range of things, whether it is the, difficulties you could have with your governing body. I mean, luckily, me and mine have gotten really well for a long time, and long may that continue. But equally so, the Ofsted thing, my battles with unions over the years. And there are times where you feel that there are people who are actively out to undermine you without really thinking what that means. You're trying to make this person appear either incompetent or dishonest or a threat. And actually, it's a person
Mhm.
and it has an impact on them. And I don't think that people either sometimes recognize that or sometimes want to recognize that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, I think this is apologies if this is like talking too much about myself here, but I mean, I feel like there's a tightrope that you walk between being too open and not open enough. And you think, well, if you open up to your chair of governors who then uses that information to kind of like throw you under the bus, that you think, well, why did I ever say anything to you? Like I should have just protected myself from you. And I
Yeah,
didn't. I actually opened up to you and that you use that against me later. That's like, what the hell is that about? And then it's the same with parents. Like I found this really hard to get right that being super honest with parents when things are great. Here's what we're doing. We're going to do this. We've got these ideas, and it's all buzzy, buzzy. But and actually, difficult exam results one year or something. You're thinking, we're struggling with this. We're finding it hard. A few behaviour issues, and the parents were telling me, Tom, too honest. I don't want it. We don't want to know that. We want to know it's all lovely. So can we go back to you telling us it's all lovely again, please? I'm thinking,
yeah.
well, I thought you liked the honesty, and they're going, not that honest, not that honest.
And do you know what? And you're right. It's a difficult balance, I think. It's a judgment call, isn't it? And I think the reality is that like all judgment calls, we get them wrong, I think, as often as we get them right. In fact, my belief is that we get most things wrong, actually. When you look back retrospectively, um, most things that you thought at the time were a good idea probably weren't that great an idea, and you don't realize that until afterwards. And one of the things that I always say is one of my ambitions in life is to be less wrong today than I was yesterday. Uh, because I just think, we have to accept we're wrong a lot. But yeah, I think, that it's a judgment call. And I think that I've always taken a very open approach. I'm open with my governors. I'm willing to say, yeah, look, that was a complete flop. That just didn't work, and we're going to change it. Because my view is that if I'm honest about those things, then it means that when I'm really saying, look, this is something that I really value, I really believe, and I think is really good, then there is a greater belief that that's likely to be the case. But it's a risk. because as you say, that trust isn't always justified. You know, you can get it wrong, and there are people out there who will take those things and use them against you. And I think, yeah, you just have to, you either have to take that risk or you don't. And it sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
And just thinking then about being honest and open and what you tell people and what you don't tell people. I was sitting with a group of head teachers at an event recently in an evening, and somebody asked the question, "What's the maddest thing that's ever happened to you in headship?" Oh my God. Oh my goodness. The stories that came out that night of things that you would never think would happen in a school, just random acts of things that had happened, and you think,
Yeah,
just when you think you've got headship nailed, something completely like you couldn't make it up. If you tried to explain to somebody what had happened that day, they
yeah,
wouldn't believe you. And I think that this kind of calm leadership bit gives you that wisdom to think, it's not me. This is
yeah.
this is the universe.
I remember sitting with my school business manager um, earlier on in my career, and the two of us having this conversation where we basically said, we have got to be a couple of adrenaline junkies to be doing these roles. Because you know that's another role where you know every day's a surprise waiting to happen,
Yeah.
and I think that's it. You know, these are roles where you do stop being surprised. Typically, as you say, every so often something does come and you think, "Wow, really? I didn't see that coming." And that was the thing that at the start of my career was the scary thing. And I mentioned this idea about being constantly on the edge of your comfort zone. But now I'm comfortable being on the edge of my comfort zone because I know there's always something new around the corner as well. But yeah, it is it's a mad job.
Oh,
100.
it is. And
It
this
is
big bit
mad.
of learning that we all realised was in those moments when that mad thing was happening, we'd all got, like I said, that adrenaline rush and oh my God, this
Yeah.
panic. A few years down the line, we were all sitting around in the evening talking about it, thinking, now this has
And
actually become.
you can laugh at it. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. There's been many bizarre things. Absolutely.
But it's I mean I love talking to head teachers because I mean we've spoken to people like Caroline Derbyshire, Vic Goddard. I mean lots of heads, and you know they're people I look up to hugely, and I feel like you know people will have the same feeling listening to this, that you know you kind of have a groundedness, but also you're kind of without any big ego around it. You're projecting a kind of vision for what leadership can be, which I think is quite exciting and inspiring, and hopefully people will be thinking, well, you know, perhaps it makes it feel like it's accessible to me, and I hope that goes widely. We're going to come to the end soon, so just I want to just we mentioned this before we came on to start the recording that you're going to be at the Wellington Festival of Education. So you know, so these are the sorts of platforms you're talking at. What sorts of things are you talking about at Wellington?
So on the first day, on the 3rd of July, I will be talking about calm leadership. So very much around the sort of things we've been talking about today. And then on the second day, I'm with the head teachers roundtable lot. So you mentioned some of them there, Caroline, Vic, and so on. And we're talking about emotionally intelligent leadership, which is something that I think is really needed right now. Can't wait. Excited.
It's fantastic. And is that linked to some sort of like agenda? Because I know some of the heads round table has lobbied for various things. And so is that connected to some sort of a lobbying for support for heads? Like what's the link to that agenda with you know emotional?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're really keen to push is a really kind of inclusive agenda, and actually part of that is about having people in leadership who really believe in inclusion and humanity and dealing with people as people and avoiding burnout and all of those things that we know are really challenging within the system. That you know the job working in education is tough enough, and we know that for all of the different surveys and statistics about people recruitment and retention, all that kind of thing. And it's very much about trying to create leaders who are mindful of that and really determined to lead in a way that mitigates against those things as much as possible. So I think that's why it's a critical thing.
Well, honestly, well, Patrick, I think we have to stop there now. But congratulations on writing the book.
Thank you.
It's a top read, and I think we'll commit to profiling it again, at least in one of our episodes when it's out, so people can, because sometimes you get the momentum of people will be all wanting to read it, but they can't yet. But when they do, we'll promote it again, because I feel like it's
Brilliant.
really needs to be read by people who are leaders or not leaders. But honestly, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
No problem. Can I say one more thing before we finish that I
Yeah.
think was really important, and I forgot to say it at the beginning, which is the idea of calm itself. One of the things that was really important to me was that it genuinely was authentic. I didn't want to have anything that was attached to me as a label that wasn't real. It couldn't be fake. So the word calm itself came from an activity that I did with my leadership team. At the end of the summer term, we do this activity where we all write down on a piece of paper something positive about each other, something that we've been impressed with, or something they did that was we're really proud of. And when mine came back to me with all the comments from my team, the word calm had been mentioned a number of times by different colleagues. So that is where the birth came from, of that as being the actual phrase. I think it's just important because for me that's really important, because it leans into the authenticity of this as something that I believe in.
Well, that's interesting, because I did wonder about that, and I actually was thinking it's a good self-description, because you do have this manner which has a calmness to it, and it's actually really reassuring. As someone who's like, if you imagine a parent, of a kid, like the head teacher's really calm, and I'm just thinking, be more Patrick, because that's kind of like, it's inspiring. You want to be like that. And there are other people who call themselves other things, like, and I always think it's a bit, if you call yourself, like, I don't know, if you call yourself ethical, I think it's quite a high stand, like,
Yeah.
But calm, I mean, it is a characteristic you project, and it feels totally authentic just listening to you, but also knowing about you, it feels it. So, it's really worth seeing. Okay, well, look, thank you so much. It's been a real joy talking to you. I'm so pleased that we got to fit this into your busy time, and thank you to everyone listening to Mind the Gap. We're now past our 100th episode, so we're into a groove now. We've been going for 5 years, but we've got another 14 years to go before we can meet Patrick's longevity as a head teacher. Thank you so much for listening to Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, and we'll see you really soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Mind the Gap. I'm Emma Turner, and I've been presenting with my co-host Tom Sherrington. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, share on social media, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on our YouTube channel, search for Mind the Gap with Tom and Emma, or head over to Spotify for an audio version. This podcast was produced in association with Haringey Education Partnership, and our producer for today's episode was Luke Kemper.